The penthouse overlooking Manhattan was a fortress of glass and steel, yet it felt like a tomb. Gabriel Russo stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection sharp in the glass-tailored black suit, broad shoulders, a face carved by power and restraint. Below him the city pulsed with life, unaware that its most feared ruler had not slept in 3 nights. Behind him, the room was silent. Too silent. 3-year-old Luca Russo sat on the Persian rug, clutching a small wooden train. He did not push it. He did not speak. His dark eyes stared at nothing, as if the world had ended and no one had bothered to tell him life was supposed to continue. "Luca," Gabriel said softly. No response. Doctors had come. Therapists had come. Nannies had come and gone. None of them could reach the child. Since Elena's funeral, Luca had not spoken a single word. Gabriel turned away from the window, his jaw tightening. He had broken men twice his size. He had stared down guns without blinking. Yet this silence terrified him. He knelt slowly in front of his son. "Papa is here," he whispered. Luca's fingers tightened around the train, but he did not look up. For the first time in his life, Gabriel Russo felt powerless. Grace Mitchell's feet ached as she wiped down the last table of the diner. It was nearly midnight. Again. Her apron was stained with coffee, her hair pulled into a tired bun, and her mind was already counting hours until her second shift at the late-night cafe. 2 jobs barely covered rent. 3 barely covered groceries. Yet every morning she still found time to stop at the church on 47th Street not to pray, but to sit quietly. To remember her mother's voice. To breathe. Grace believed grief didn't disappear. It just learned how to sit beside you. That belief was why she noticed the little boy. He sat at the corner booth, untouched, a plate of pancakes growing cold. His nanny whispered urgently into her phone, eyes darting toward the entrance every few seconds. The boy didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink when Grace approached. She crouched to his level. "What's your train's name?" she asked gently. Nothing. Grace felt something twist in her chest. Not pity, but recognition. She had seen this silence before. Before Grace could try again, a shadow fell over the booth. "Step away from the child." The voice was calm. Dangerous. Grace looked up. The man standing there didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. Gabriel Russo's presence filled the room like a storm held perfectly still. Every instinct told Grace to back away, but Luca's tiny fingers tightened around her sleeve. Gabriel noticed. His eyes darkened not with rage, but shock. "You touched him," he said quietly. "I didn't mean," Grace began. "He hasn't let anyone near him." Grace swallowed. "He's lonely." The word hit harder than any insult. The diner seemed to disappear. Gabriel studied her like a puzzle he didn't understand. "Who are you?" he asked. "Grace," she said. "Just Grace." Luca tugged her sleeve again. And for the first time in weeks, the child looked up. Grace didn't rush. She didn't smile too big or ask too much. She leaned closer and whispered something only Luca could hear. "It's okay to miss her," she said softly. "Talking doesn't mean you're forgetting." Luca's lip trembled. Gabriel froze. A small sound, broken, really escaped the child's throat. Not a word, but a sob. Gabriel dropped to his knees without realizing it. In a crowded diner, the most feared man in New York knelt before his son, tears burning his eyes, as a struggling waitress held the pieces of his world together. And in that moment, Gabriel Russo knew one thing with terrifying certainty. He could not let her walk away. The diner returned to its normal sounds, slowly clinking plates, murmured conversations, the hiss of the grill, but for Grace, everything felt suspended. Gabriel Russo was still on his knees. He hadn't noticed the stares. He hadn't noticed the phones discreetly lifted and then quickly lowered by people who suddenly remembered exactly who he was. All he saw was his son. Luca's small shoulders shook as he cried, face pressed into Grace's sleeve like it was the safest place left in the world. Gabriel reached out, hesitated, then rested his hand gently on the boys' backs. Va bene, amore, he murmured. Papa's here. Grace looked up at him, unsure if she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to don't, Gabriel interrupted. His voice wasn't sharp. It was strained. Human. He rose to his feet slowly, lifting Luca into his arms. The boy didn't resist. His tiny hand clutched Grace's apron one last time before loosening. Gabriel met Grace's eyes. You saw something no one else did, he said. I want you to come with us. Grace stiffened. I can't. I have work, and I don't even know you. That wasn't entirely true. Everyone knew him. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and placed it gently on the table instead of forcing it into her hand. Come tomorrow, he said. Just for an hour. There was a pause. Please. That single word spoken without command or threat terrified her more than anything else. The next afternoon, Grace stood outside a towering glass building overlooking Central Park. Security ushered her in silently. No names were spoken, no questions asked. The penthouse was breathtaking and suffocating. Everything was immaculate. Cold, as if no one dared disturb the air. Luca sat on the couch, small legs dangling, staring at the same wooden train from the night before. Grace approached slowly. Hi, Luca, she said softly. No response. But he didn't turn away either. Gabriel watched from a distance, arms crossed, tension carved into every line of his body. Grace knelt. I brought something, she said, pulling a small paper bag from her purse. Inside was a children's book, well-worn, edges soft with use. My mom used to read this to me, she explained gently, when things were hard. She didn't look at Gabriel as she spoke. She didn't need to. She opened the book and began to read, her voice steady and warm. Luca's fingers brushed the page. Once. Then again. They were halfway through the book when it happened. Grace reached the final page and smiled softly. And the little train learned, she read, that even when the track feels broken, it can still move forward 1 inch at a time. Silence followed. Then train. The word was barely audible. Grace froze. Gabriel's breath caught violently in his chest. Grace didn't react. She didn't gasp or smile too big. She only nodded. Yes, she whispered. Train. Luca looked at her, eyes wide, as if unsure whether the sound he'd made was allowed to exist. Red, he added, quieter still. Gabriel sank into the chair behind him, one hand covering his mouth. It was the first word Luca had spoken in nearly 2 months. Later, Gabriel poured coffee and neither of them drank. You understand, he said carefully, that I can't just let you leave. Grace straightened. I'm not asking for money. I know. I'm not asking for protection. I know that too. He studied her for a long moment. I'm asking you to stay, he said, as long as Luca needs you. Grace shook her head. I'm not a therapist. No, Gabriel said quietly. You're something else. The word lingered between them. Name your terms, he added. She hesitated. I go home every night. A nod. Agreed. No weapons around him. Another nod. Slower. Agreed. And I don't want to know what you do. This time Gabriel paused. Then don't ask, he said. It wasn't a lie. Grace exhaled. Then I'll help. For Luca. Something in Gabriel's chest loosened for the first time since Elena died. Days passed. Grace read. She played. She listened. She taught Luca that missing someone didn't mean losing them. He began to laugh quietly at first, like a sound he wasn't sure he was allowed to make. Gabriel watched it all from the edges of the room. The penthouse slowly changed. Windows opened. Sunlight returned. Silence loosened its grip. And somewhere deep in Gabriel Russo's carefully guarded heart, something dangerous began to grow. Hope. It came quietly. A car idling too long across the street. A call Gabriel ended too quickly. A security detail doubled without explanation. Grace noticed. "Is Lucas safe?" she asked one evening. Gabriel met her gaze. "With me," he said. "Always." It was a promise. And a warning. Grace noticed the changes before anyone mentioned them. The smiles from the security team were tighter. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Luca was never left alone anymore, not even for a minute. One afternoon, as she helped Luca stack wooden blocks by the window, Grace caught her reflection in the glass. She didn't recognize herself. She looked protected. And protection, she knew, always came at a cost. "Grace," Gabriel said from behind her, "we need to talk."